The Bulldogs are 6-0 and back at number 1 heading into Saturday's homecoming game against Vanderbilt. So why does it feel like things have been just a little bit off the past few weeks? Hey everybody, this is Sarah Spencer with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and this is Know Your Dogs. To help me break that down and preview the Vanderbilt game, I'll be joined by Kirby Smart, senior defensive back Chris Smith, and our Georgia beat writer Chip Towers. So stay with us.
I would say it is fair to judge a team based off its performance, but you got to understand that a lot of the teams that we face have very great players as well. You know, these are other D1 players that we're facing every week in and week out too. So I think it's fair to judge based off performance, but you also got to understand that the other teams we playing aren't pushovers either, man. They come into play every week just like we do, you know, and you got to give them a lot of credit as well as give us our credit when it's due, you know.
First of all, you guys might notice a little bit of a scenery change. We do not have the gorgeous Sanford Stadium backdrop today because it's raining. After about a month of pretty fall weather, it's pouring today in Athens. So we're gonna do the fully filled press box for you and just enjoy the G behind me. Georgia has gone 3 straight games without a touchdown pass from quarterback Stetson Bennett. Now, on one hand, the Bulldogs are still number 3 in the SEC in passing yards per game at 320.3. So there's still some productivity there, and it's hard to complain when they're putting up 6 rushing touchdowns in a 42-10 win against Auburn last Saturday. So here's what Georgia coach Kirby Smart had to say about Stetson Bennett and how the run game can open up the pass game for the Bulldogs.
I feel great about Stetson as a passer, always have. He does a tremendous job seeing the field. He does a great job going through his reads. He's got great arm talent. He can throw touch passes. He can anticipate throws as good as anybody in terms of anticipating a guy getting open while he's getting pressure. Seen him repeatedly do that here. He's done a good job in the passing game. So very pleased with where he is in regards to that. Maybe they were tired from the strike and attack of the 290 yards that had been gained, and they weren't quite rushing as fast, and they weren't getting back there as fast. We were a little more accurate in terms of it. Threw the ball a little better. I mean, we had a couple passes in the first quarter that we either threw high or we dropped, and then we overthrew a guy on third down. I mean, to be honest with you, when you run the ball better, guess what you also normally do? Throw the ball better. So on the drives that we ran the ball well, we threw the ball well. On the drives that we didn't run it well, we usually didn't throw it well because it brought up third and long.
This will mark Vanderbilt's 3rd straight game against a top 10 opponent, coming off losses to Alabama and Ole Miss. Now, Ole Miss, they were actually leading 2017 at halftime before things kind of fell apart in the second half. But Georgia coach Kirby Smart actually said Vanderbilt might be one of the most improved teams in the SEC.
You start with the first game of the year. You know, they go out to Hawaii and play in a tough environment, tough time change. Very mature to handle that and play well. They played well last week. You watched the Ole Miss tape. They came out and attacked, played well. I mean, well coached. So the expectation is that you're going to grow and get better. And everybody measures that in different amounts. I'm sure Clark has his way of measuring it, just like we have our way of trying to measure improvement. But they probably, to me, one of the most improved teams in our league in terms of the way they're playing right now.
All right, everybody, let's bring in our Georgia beat writer, Chip Towers. Chip, I had a thought the other day. To start the season, I think we were kind of talking about Georgia's run game not looking the way it normally does. The last few games, it's sort of been the pass game not looking fantastic. How much are those struggles real, and how much are they kind of proportionate to the sky-high expectations this Georgia team has on it?
Yeah, it's interesting that you would bring up expectations because everything's relative to that, right? And when you're the #1 ranked Georgia Bulldogs, the standard, as Kirby likes to talk about it, is very, very high. So you're supposed to do everything well. You're supposed to run the ball well. You're supposed to pass the ball well. You're supposed to play defense better than anybody in the whole country, and that really hasn't been the case at all. But I tell people all the time, seasons aren't static. They move and change. They're dependent on a lot of different things. This is a young team. I think the amazing thing about this Georgia team was how well they played early. I mean, you think about how they played against Oregon and the way they played against South Carolina. Finally, as they got a little further in the season, some of the flaws started to manifest themselves here and there, especially when injuries started to creep up a little bit. So, the truth lies somewhere in between all that. Are they a great passing team? Are they a great running team? They're a little bit of both, and the hope is that by game 12, you're good at everything.
Let's talk about that passing game a little bit. It just hasn't looked as dominant as it was to start the season. But again, like we just talked about, you completely demolished Oregon, and now it's like, what do you mean you didn't have this crazy passing game? How much do you expect that? What have you seen from the passing struggle?
Well, I mean, it's been a struggle lately. I mean, there's no question about that. Stetson Bennett hadn't thrown a touchdown in the last 3 games. There's been drops. He has missed. I thought actually at the end of the day, when you looked at his Stetson stats, it didn't look all that bad against Auburn, right? I mean, you ended up with
you padded it in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, 65% passing or something like that. But I mean, he had 25 yards at halftime, and we all saw how wide open Brock Bowers was and how wide open Ladd McConkey is. Those are the type of throws that you absolutely have to have. If you're that open, you want to underthrow rather than overthrow, and he was overthrowing everybody. The converse is that Georgia's run game has really come alive, really from the fourth quarter of the Missouri game on. But I have a feeling that Georgia's passing game is going to get better this week. Vanderbilt comes in here 123rd. Their ranking in pass defense, I think it's 111th of passes of 10 yards or more allowed. I think Georgia will work on that pass game a good bit this Saturday.
Definitely a good opportunity. I think he said it was we looked it up and it was a 38.5 point spread right now, which is, I mean, if y'all know, like that's nuts. That's an insane point spread. What do you make of that?
It's really crazy. And again, it speaks to those expectations you told of. I mean, first off, Las Vegas is desperately trying to get people to put money on Vanderbilt. So that line is moving and moving and moving. At one point, it was up to nearly 40 points. I don't know where it'll end up before Saturday, but that is a mammoth expectation. And fact of the matter is Georgia's covered it most of the time. I mean, we sat here and talked when Georgia was getting ready to play Oregon, and I couldn't believe how big the line was. That was 17.5 points at the time. Georgia covered. Same thing against South Carolina over there. Georgia covered. Now, they didn't cover against Kent State, and they didn't cover against Missouri.
Beat up on Auburn.
Yeah, beat up on Auburn pretty good. Covered that line as well. And these are record lines, y'all. I mean, like in SEC play, SEC football is designed to be competitive, even with teams like Vanderbilt. That hadn't been the case so far. I have a feeling it's going to get a little tougher in November. But as far as this Saturday, homecoming, I think there's a pretty good chance that Georgia's going to put another W in the bank.
This is one of those things, while we're on the topic of just competition and expectations, that does make me think a little bit. I'm sitting here talking about with the passing game, the run game, but then they're beating everybody by 32.
I mean, you could, it's just throw special teams in there, right? They've been imperfect. You had the muff exhibition by Ladd McConkey, but you've also had block punts and fake punts, and they stopped one this past week. So, look, again, I fall back on, seasons aren't static. And that's why you hear Kirby talking about, we're just trying, we're going to break down the tape and find out what went wrong that week. And we're going to try to fix that and make that better. And, in the grand scheme of things, Georgia's still ranked number 1, at least in the AP poll. They, at least the mass population that is the media that covers college football believes Georgia is the best team of all, and so far they have done nothing to disprove that.
Give me your impression of this Vanderbilt team that Georgia's going to take on.
I like Clark Lee. You might have heard, Kirby, you can tell his affection for him. Clark Lee's a great defensive coach. Georgia fans might not remember it. He was at Wake Forest before, but he was the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame in both those meetings in 2017 and 19, and those were very good defense. So he knows what he's doing. They don't make a lot of mistakes. They're like Georgia. I think they're tied with Georgia in turnover margin. And their quarterback, A.J. Swan, is a Georgia boy. 8 touchdowns, no interceptions. They got a great young back that's 5'9", 205, runs the ball tough. Ray Davis, and they got a pretty good selection of wide receivers. They're decent. But, last week they led Ole Miss 13-3 in the first quarter. I think they were ahead at halftime.
2017 they were up.
Yeah, and they ended up getting blown out. That's what usually happens with teams like that. And that's, if you look at Georgia over the course of the season, they've kind of struggled in the first half. But as the long haul of all 4 quarters goes along, Georgia's depth and talent takes over, and they just pull away and get farther and farther down the line.
And that's what good teams tend to do. Chip, thank you so much for joining me. Thanks to all of you for watching. Make sure you go to ajc.com or subscribe to our YouTube channel to find more videos just like this one.